When I first started driving and covering electric vehicles 17 years ago, it's fair to say that the majority of people I encountered in my little, limited-speed, three-wheel, yellow flying banana of a death trap thought that I was a little different for wanting to drive an electric car. 17 years ago. Wow. If you drove an electric car back then, you were either super lucky and owned one of the previous generations of EVs from the turn of the century, had a home-built one, or had paid someone an inordinate amount of money to make one for you to your specific specifications. And you probably dealt with all of the inconveniences of EV ownership of the time, like limited charging infrastructure, like a total boss. These days, things are easier. There are more electric vehicles on sale today than at any point before in history. We are told consumer choice is at an all-time high for EVs, and with many governments around the world giving out significant incentives to encourage you to go green, there's never been a better time to go electric. But while many people watching this video already have an electric car or have one order on one, many more people are waiting for a car that will actually suit their needs, a car that will make sense on their journey to dump the pump. Yet for those people, in fact the majority of car buyers today, the electric car they want doesn't exist yet. And today I'm going to examine why that is. In the last 60 years or so, the automotive industry has gotten extremely good at giving car buyers what it thinks they need in a car. Through focus groups and carefully selected surveys, automakers will play the part of wanting to listen to what buyers want. But the reality is that for a lot of the time at least, automakers will ultimately do two things. They'll make the vehicles that make them the most money, and then they'll make the vehicles that they can convince buyers they really need. That first one, knowing the vehicle that will make them the most money, is the reason we have a trend towards ever increasingly expensive cars, both electric and internal combustion. Luxury vehicles might have lots of fancy gadgets in them, but the profit margins on those vehicles are far higher than your average budget hatchback. It's less risky for automakers to build a more expensive luxury car on a new platform or drivetrain than it is for them to build a super affordable high-volume vehicle on that same bleeding-edge technology platform. If an automaker can make a really high-performance vehicle with incredible performance and range, they can choose to scale things back to make more affordable, more everyday models. But it's a lot harder to do things the other way around, as the history books are all too good at documenting. It is, after all, why Tesla started with Model S, before then shifting to Model X, then to Model 3, and finally Model Y. It's why most electric vehicles sit at the higher end of an automaker's portfolio rather than at the bottom. And it's why most automakers who are making electric vehicles today focus first on higher-end performance variants before then going for more mainstream everyday versions. Making higher-end models with higher sticker prices also helps automakers make up for the lack of economies of scale that don't really kick in until you're making hundreds of thousands or even millions of examples of a particular vehicle on a proven, mature platform. Making a car that is compelling to a specific buyer and then convincing that buyer that the car is exactly what they need, or that they're not cool, virile, or insert some other insecurity here, and then charging them a lot of money for it, is a practice that is as old as the auto industry itself. In the electric vehicle world, that tactic is heavily aligned with the tech industry practice of being an early adopter. If you can appeal to a customer's sense of excitement at being the first to have some new and shiny vehicle with new and even shinier technology, or you can make them believe they are living the future today, you're onto something big. Apple didn't win the hearts and minds of people with its range of funky-coloured iMacs at the turn of the century because the machines were somehow superior to a PC of the time. In fact, they weren't. They lacked the expandability and serviceability that most PC users took for granted. But where Apple succeeded was creating the fear of missing out, FOMO, for millions of customers who wanted to have the latest thing, which was a transparent plastic box containing a fully functioning computer that was part art piece and part fashion statement. Something that says, "I've arrived and I'm sticking it to the man," rather than, "I can choose to stay and finish those TPS reports however long it takes, or I'm looking for a new job on Monday." The same technique was what was used to get people behind the wheel of a Tesla. You'll miss out if you don't do it. What will people think if you're not driving the latest thing on 4 wheels? That, and wouldn't it be great if you could show everyone that your car drives itself? Tesla's high-tech specs and unique approach to sales and service grabbed the attention of many car buyers, specifically those who wanted a higher-end model and could easily afford to buy one. I mean, you only have to look at the number of people who purchased Tesla full self-driving in full long before it was ready for deployment to see that FOMO and wanting to, as we used to say in the UK, keep up with the Joneses, was a motivating factor for many. Buying something knowing that you can use some super awesome feature out of the box is one thing, but setting aside $10,000 or more, it's now $15,000, in the hope that someday you might be able to use it, that is frankly money that most people don't have. The luxurification of cars, Kate did a video on this recently, means that many people are now going to extraordinary lengths to buy cars that they often really can't afford. And you can see this in the rise of super long car loans. When I was a fresh-faced oboist out of college 20 years ago, a new car loan was usually somewhere between 3 and 5 years in length. Now, banks and auto dealers regularly sign people up for 7 and sometimes even 8-year vehicle loans. Banks profit from longer loan terms and automakers get to sell more high-end models as a consequence, normalizing sticker prices that are often as much as 1/2 of the annual salary of the person trying to buy them. Let's not kid ourselves, though. While online media, YouTube and TikTok especially, create the impression that buying an EV that's $50 or $60 or $70,000 or equivalent is normal and achievable for most people, the reality is that for most people, it's not. The only reason I was able to justify my recent F-150 Lightning Lariat purchase was because I was buying a vehicle that was both a home backup power solution and a work truck, and something that could reduce our need to take short-haul flights for the channel. That and the fact that my partner has a pretty decent salary and a decent high credit score, and that enabled us to qualify for a super low interest vehicle loan. And yes, because some people have asked, it is my personal vehicle, and no, I'm not writing it off my taxes as a business expense. In fact, the only deductions we take for the truck are the miles deductions that we take when we drive it on work trips. Most electric cars being made today satisfy a small percentage of wealthier consumers. They're either those with disposable income or creditworthiness to buy something more expensive, or they are willing to go to extraordinary lengths to go without things that most of us would consider essential in order to not miss out and ultimately be able to buy the car. Which, unfortunately, is where we end up with this disconnect between what automakers think people want and what we in the automotive media help folks to believe is normal and desirable with what folks actually want and can afford, something that automakers aren't always that good at discerning. Of course, we all know what would happen if everyone was given a carte blanche to design their own cars that meet their own personal desires and wishes. The Homer. And while that one vehicle may suit one person's need, in that case a very yellow, middle-aged guy, it would cause shock and revulsion from others.
A car designed for the average man. The Homer.
Luckily though, that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is a vehicle that will appeal to most people. Most people don't care about how many doodads a car has or if it has a special button to give you a little extra oomph at the stoplight. They don't care about over-the-air updates, semi-autonomous or fully autonomous driving, or even if the car has a massive touchscreen or not. They want to know they can afford the payments. They want to know if the car is affordable to fuel. They want to know it will carry out the daily commute or run errands. They may have concerns about warranty periods, or if they can do the occasional longer distance trip. They want to know that fueling is not going to take forever, and they want to be able to feel comfortable and confident behind the wheel. They want a car that's not going to be in the shop for extended periods of time if it has an accident or breaks down. And they want a car that just gets them from point A to point B. Most of all, they want a car that will be reliable. Because most automakers are still in the early days of adopting electric vehicle technology and don't yet have the economics of scale in place to make EV platforms cost-effective, they're focusing for the most part on luxury high-end models. Sure, more affordable models are coming. General Motors, for example, is working on bringing the Chevrolet Blazer and Equinox EV models to market this year. And in Europe, where cars tend towards lower average sticker prices than, say, North America, I would argue automakers are further along that journey to true affordability and practicality for EVs for the masses. But automakers are also focused on two other things: making back their investment as quickly as possible to keep shareholders happy, and beating Tesla. We are in economically uncertain times. COVID, frankly, did a massive number on the global economy and still is. And we are seeing headlines every day of major companies letting huge numbers of staff go. Automakers don't want to be saddled with the debt of investing in new technology for long periods of time, and Toyota is a great historical example of what not to do. When Toyota launched its Prius in 1998, it did so because it was reacting to hybrid concepts produced earlier that decade by US automakers. It was scared and invested a lot of money into building a compact hybrid system that could be put in cars that would appeal to people who had a little extra cash but also wanted to minimize their fuel bills. It wanted to make sure it didn't miss out from the competition of other automakers. And it took Toyota 12 years and 3 whole generations of hybrid drivetrains before it started making a profit on its investment. To paraphrase the meme, ain't nobody got time for that. Today, automakers want to recoup their investments as quickly as possible, and most companies seem to see the way to do that as beating Tesla, because it was often Tesla that stole their customers in the first place. There's a metaphorical arms race between legacy automakers and Tesla, as well as a few new fledgling EV startups to make the fastest, most tech-filled cars they can. Even less expensive electric models from legacy automakers like the Kia Niro EV we recently reviewed are doing it to some extent. And they're doing it because we in the EV world have put so much time and effort into emphasizing power and performance and high-tech gubbins that, well, we've got into this self-fulfilling cyclone of demand. Look, take my Ford F-150 Lightning, a vehicle that I'm using as a demonstration because even as an owner, I feel its specs are over the top. My truck makes 580 horsepower and produces 775 pound-feet of torque. 20 years ago, a gasoline Ford F-150 with an inline 6-cylinder engine produced 145 horsepower and 265 pound-feet of torque. Sure, that 1992 F-150 couldn't tow as much as my modern F-150 Lightning, but at least on paper there's no reason why in 20 years a truck has added quite as much power as it has, other than to just be the biggest and baddest it can be. A few years ago, a gasoline F-150 made 290 horsepower at its base trim, but that's still nowhere near what my truck does. My truck is over the top. It's excessive. And in being over the top and excessive, it might dominate the market, but it's also pushed its price up. There's something else too. Selling high-end halo electric vehicles gets companies a lot of attention, a lot of kudos, and it helps them satisfy zero-emission vehicle mandates. It helps shorten the payback of time investing in EV technology. I mean, even Tesla, which has been promising a truly affordable EV for years, is still focusing on higher-end models because they're easier for it to make a profit on. And while Tesla doesn't have this, most automakers have a solution to affordability. Instead of selling EVs, they sell cheap internal combustion engine cars for those who cannot afford an EV. They may pay less at the dealership, but they'll pay more in the long term, and they help keep dealerships and the service chain humming along. EV ownership may be cheaper in the long term, but that logic only works if you can afford the higher sticker price up front, or happen to have an incredible credit score. It's an unfair and an abhorrent system. We're starting to see more companies bringing more affordable models to market, but with few exceptions, the sticker price is still way above what most people can truly afford. And this brings me to the final part of today's video. The EV world is moving so quickly in terms of technology and capabilities that when a company does use an older platform to build a more affordable model, the Chevrolet Bolt EV is a great example, they often appear far less appealing as a consequence to buyers. The Bolt EV is a cracking car, and the Bolt EUV, while I personally don't enjoy driving it as much as I do the Bolt EV, is also a cracking car for what it offers at the price point it is at. But they don't have the same fancy high-speed charging that other EVs now offer, and if we look back to our discussion about YouTube and TikTok and what automakers want us to buy and influencers make us think we want to buy, many customers are put off buying them without even test driving them first. And side note, even if I or someone else says that we personally don't like a particular vehicle, you should still try it yourself if you're so interested. There are a few other examples, though, of similar older tech-filled vehicles that are now becoming more mainstream affordable. But buyers often don't want to buy a car that's based on old technology. They want a car that is contemporary with whatever is being offered elsewhere. Aha! But what about that old chestnut of trickle-downs, I hear you ask? Most people who can't afford a brand new car will just buy used. Used EVs are getting better all the time, so why all of the fuss about affordable EVs if you can just buy good EVs used? And my answer is this. In an ideal world, used EVs would make EVs affordable for everyone at lower income levels. But here's the issue. A lack of reliable public charging infrastructure in many places, often tied to areas that have been historically subjected to redlining, not to mention a reticence by many automakers, including Tesla, to ensure that servicing and parts for older EVs remain cost-effective and affordable, means that many used EVs on the market today aren't considered a safe buy by those on limited incomes. Unless they happen to live near a third-party specialist or are handy with DIY stuff themselves, they don't want to buy. And I'm talking about being handy in kinds of ways that weren't required for internal combustion engine vehicles. In short, though, there is hope. More affordable EVs are coming. This year, we should see more affordable vehicles hit the market as economies of scale kick in more than ever before. And of course, we will be covering them on this channel. If you really want a new electric car that meets your needs, the time you'll have to wait will depend on where you are in the world. I honestly wish I could just wave a magic wand and make that happen today. And I wish we had as much affordable EV choices as there are in the luxury EV segment. So what can you do? In the interim, keep pressuring automakers, keep calling for affordable models, and keep pushing for third-party access to repair paths and right to repair for used EVs. Then we really will be going amazing places. And on that note, we're done with today's video. If you liked it, you know what to do, and feel free to tip us with a super thanks. The comments are open for your thoughts, as is our Discord chat room. Links are below. And if you want more, subscribe, hit the bell, and follow the links to become a supporter through YouTube or Patreon. You'll also find links below to Ko-fi, Bitcoin and our swag store, and do check out our Mastodon server because we have our very own one. Scrolling on my right is the list of amazing charged up supporters, and shout outs go to our self-driving tier supporters: Mike Weeder, Linda Iris, Sean Tucker, Patrick Boyansky, Chris Nelson, Chris Maxwell, Brian Newton, Michael Goad, Bennett Elder, Andrew Martin, Pedro Mora Pinheiro, Brophy Wolf, Chris and Michael Johnson, Taslet and the Gong, Dan Blair, Peter Dillinger, Gordon C, Stephen O'Donoghue, Kyle Hodgson, Anthony Coates, Regine Fellows, Denny Hyde, Chris Asentar and Jim Burness. Finally, out of this world thanks to our top tier supporters: Andrew Glenn, Anonymous Freak, JP Fagerback, Joe Bresney, John Lyons, Rory Litwin, Kevin Burrowbridge, Dave Kitchen, Aaron Hahn, Laura Reynolds, Marcel Ward, Matthew Drobnak, Paul Conway, Reggie Watts, Will Graylin and Ian. I'll be back soon with more videos, as will the rest of the team, but until then, keep evolving!